Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to another discipleship podcast with Bill Dupenthaler. And we're both from Legacy, as you know. And our whole thing at Legacy is becoming disciples who make disciples. And we want to train people and equip people and encourage people and uplift people to become disciple makers. And first, you have to be a disciple to become a disciple maker. And, Bill and I have been on this journey for, him. I don't want to say because he's a little older than I am, but a
80
lot of
plus
years. Combined, yes.
Right, combined, yeah.
Just to be clear. And Bill, by the way, is almost all of those years. So you get an idea of his experience in making disciples. And over the last couple of years, though, we've been asking people some pretty similar questions. And you guys have heard us say this before, but I'll just repeat it. I was at the gym, Bill, shooting baskets the other day with my kids, and my kid wasn't shooting the ball properly, and I'm not really caring that much. He's a football player, so I don't really care too much. But this nice guy comes over and he helps my kid learn how to shoot the ball properly. He spends 20 minutes maybe teaching him how to follow through straight, how to hold his hand as a guide instead of behind the ball, or behind the ball instead of shooting two hands, we shoot one-handed. And it was really awesome. And I just started talking to the guy, and he said he was a believer, and he went to Christian school growing up. And so, of course, I asked him our two questions. I said, this is what our ministry is about, is, we're asking people two questions. First one is, do you think everybody's called to make disciples? And he starts nodding his head. And then I said, and then we ask people the follow-up question, when's the last time you made a disciple? he actually laughed out loud at me because he thought it was so funny, because nobody's going to answer yes to that question, or could answer, I did that, just a couple months ago, I made a disciple. And so we thought that this would be a great podcast for us to come back to that simple mission of Legacy, to be all about being people who make disciples who make disciples. And our focus of the podcast was going to be on why would we want to do this? Because as he's laughing and saying, nobody's doing it. Well, why would we want to? And then Bill, you asked a better question to start it off with, and I'm going to turn it over to you. What was your question?
Well, I think a lot of times people aren't clear on what we mean by making disciples. And we did a podcast last year on why people don't make disciples. And
Right.
We spent the whole time talking about whether it's fear or not knowing what to do, or don't think I could do it, and why would anybody want to listen to me, and you need to go listen to the podcast to get all that. But the question that I think a lot of people maybe wonder about is, what do you really mean by making disciples? Like, are you talking about like evangelizing people and bringing new people into the faith, or are you talking about formation of already current believers and teaching them about the Bible and what it means to follow Christ and growing in their faith and fellowship and those kind of things? Is that what you mean by discipleship? And so it's kind of an interesting question.
Well, it was funny you should bring that up, because I was having lunch with a pastor friend of mine, and he was telling me that his church scored off the charts for discipleship, and yet they were really struggling with evangelism. And so I was like, it was all I could do to bite my tongue to say, are you really doing discipleship if you're not doing evangelism? Like, is that possible? And so in his mind, and again, this is not him necessarily, it's the consultants who came in who told him, oh yeah, discipleship means making people more like Jesus. Evangelism means you're talking to people who don't yet know Jesus. And in fact, I think this is popularized by Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, The Purpose-Driven Church, in particular unpacks this one, where he talks about the purpose-driven church is focused on 5 different things. And those things are worship and ministry. And then those go with what he calls the great commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. So he says that's the first two purposes of a church. But the next three says are evangelism, fellowship, and discipleship. And then he says that comes from go and make disciples, baptizing them, and then teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you. So he separates discipleship from evangelism. And so that's what churches have done. So if
Yeah.
people think of it in terms of, oh, okay, we're discipling ministry. If I saw someone in a discipling ministry, now they assume that all we do is take people who already know Jesus and teach them more about Jesus. And I
Right.
think both you and I would say that's probably the opposite of what most people need. I mean, well, that's not 100% accurate, but most of the people we know are not doing what God's called them already of what they know, if that makes sense. Like they don't
Yeah.
need to learn more, they need to apply more and to do more and to live into things more. And it's not like you don't want to be learning. We know core of a disciple is that. But I don't know. I was blown away by that. And I was thinking, man, we just have such a different framework for understanding Jesus's call in the Great Commission. In my mind, you cannot separate the go and make disciples from evangelism. And it's just not possible.
No, and it's the same Jesus that said, "Go make disciples," who said, "Go be my witnesses." And
Yeah.
I don't think he was talking about two different things. And it says he called them that they might be with him, so that he might send them out. And so it was always about bringing new people into the faith. And Mike, I'm going to steal your line because you didn't say it when I gave you the opening a minute ago. But I loved when we were talking about this beforehand, and you said I really can't imagine that what Jesus meant with the Great Commission was, okay, guys, listen, I'm going away, so I want you to go make disciples. So what I want you to do is I want you to go around to all the churches and start really pouring into those people that are already following me and helping them to go deeper in their faith. That is not what Jesus was saying.
Yeah, I don't think you could get that as a reading here where he says, I just really want you guys to focus on the 12 of you and the other 72, that's
Get
my mission.
close, support each other, encourage each other, go deeper in your faith.
Erwin McManus, he wrote a number of pretty profound things at different times. He's a pastor out of LA, and I'll never forget, he was talking about the whole scriptures in his mind points to evangelism. I don't know about that or not, but it was pretty powerful. And he said, even the line "feed my sheep," which people look at and say that's discipleship. That's the core of what it means to be a good pastor. Is you're feeding the sheep, and we're following the lineage of Peter, who Jesus told to feed the sheep. And even if you look at that context, you're like, well, who are the sheep, right? Who are the sheep at that point? He's not looking at the other 12 disciples and saying, I really need you to feed these guys. When I'm gone, Peter, you've got to feed these guys. The other disciples, you got to feed each other. This is really key. This is important. And he was right in my mind. That feed my sheep was talking about all the sheep of Christ that are going to come in. All the sheep of Christ that are going to be brought into our lives, who clearly are being drawn to the Lord, who we then will get to feed. And so in my mind, it's both and. Like, and when we're talking about non-believers or pre-believers, or we're talking about nominal Christians who may have drifted from the Lord, those are all of our targets. All of our targets are people who are not walking closely with the Lord, and that's how I would describe it.
Right, and it's a both and though, because certainly part of discipleship is teaching people, once they have followed Christ, is teaching them to be disciples who make disciples. And it's the idea of if we only think of discipleship as just growing in your faith and that kind of thing, and then you separate out evangelism, then it kind of becomes like, well, let's hope that our church can reach a few new people this year. And it's great when they do, of course, and from time to time people come into the church and that they decide they want to follow Christ, so they come forward at an invitation or whatever. But the idea really that Jesus was talking about, and then certainly the organization Navigators made famous, was this concept of multiplication versus addition. Because if you think of evangelism and discipleship making or disciple making, if you think of it just in terms of adding a few people every year, even if you add a lot of people every year through evangelism separated from discipleship, then you're going to add a few every year. But when you think in terms of taking every person that comes to Christ, which is part of evangelism, and then teaching them to replicate that and to reproduce themselves, then it becomes literally multiplying, and 2 becomes 4 and 4 becomes 8 or 16. I forget how the whole
Yeah.
multiple.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting. Am I getting
Yes.
compound
Yes.
interest
And yes.
confused with disciple and multiplication? I guess it's
It'll
the same
eventually
thing.
get to 16, Bill. It'll eventually get to
Yes.
16, no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. 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 But you get
Well,
the idea.
so I think that what we don't think that you're called to do if you want to make disciples necessarily is to take people who are already close with the Lord, already walking with the Lord, already in a church, and saying, guys, we need to form a discipleship group. Because unless the purpose of that discipleship group is to train them to go out and make disciples, and then we're
Yeah.
100% for it. Awesome. Yes, praise God. But oftentimes what they mean by that is, no, we're just going to learn more and more and more and more. And like I said before, I'm convinced most Christians don't need to learn more. They need to apply what they've already learned and take the things that are from the back of their mind and bring them to the front of their mind. And it doesn't mean we don't always want to be learning and growing, but anyway,
But
it's probably, yeah.
well, like as you said that though, I think, to be honest, where we're at right now as a young organization, only a couple years into it, I think that early on, and even still to this day, I mean, we're doing an awful lot of what you just said, of taking people who already are followers of Christ and helping them to latch onto this idea of multiplication and this idea of
Yeah, for
going out
sure.
and making disciples, because like you said, because most people aren't doing that. Most people's idea of discipleship is just a small group that's a support group or a Bible study and that kind of thing. It doesn't go beyond that. But the hope is, I mean, I hope that in the not too distant future, that we're talking about a whole bunch of people that are going out and like reaching people that don't know Jesus, and that's going to be when we really get rolling.
Well, one of my roles at Legacy is to visit churches and to try and build bridges with churches so that we can see a possibility for us coming in and helping partner with them in ways of disciples, making disciples. And I've been really fascinated. Most churches have a this is going to sound crude, but I don't know how else to say it, is the people themselves don't think I need to make disciples. They think of themselves as people who are going to invite people to come in so somebody else can make them into a disciple. And so they have programs designed for, okay, just invite somebody and all you have to do is show up with them. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to teach them anything. You don't have to do anything with them. And I don't think those are necessarily wrong. They're reaching people for Christ. The people are learning, they're growing, but it is a whole different philosophy. It would basically be the equivalent when I was in Southern California. We had a pastor's Bible study, and the people thought that their job for evangelism, and I'm not saying it was what they thought, but if they did think, well, my job is to invite people to come to Mike's Bible study. Because then, it's a lot easier. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to know anything. I don't have to pray. I don't have to do anything. I just invite them and Mike has to do it all.
Yeah.
And I think that, people call this the anaconda church, where a lot of people are stuck in that thinking, and where there's a handful of people. And in one case, one church I know, we visited, they don't even teach it. They have a video series that teaches them about discipleship. And so it is not a bad thing because it's great teaching, but it's like, wow, the personal part of people being responsible for knowing their faith well enough to share it with others is lost. And
yeah.
So probably a good time to segue into why would we want to do this?
Yeah.
Why would we, instead of doing it the other way, why would we want to become people who make disciples? Why would we want to become disciples who make disciples? And I'll just throw it to you, Bill. I mean, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of why people would want to do this?
Well, two things came to mind right away when we posed the question. One is, like, it's kind of like, well, duh. I mean, it's just right there in the scriptures, and we've talked so much, and and frankly, we won't stop talking about the Great Commission. But Jesus said, "Go make disciples," and in Acts 1:80 said, "Go be my witnesses." And uh, it's just clear. I call them that they might be with me, that I might send them out. Uh,
Yeah,
so it's clear from the scriptures that this is what we're supposed to be doing, and so the why is because it's simply it's God's plan for reaching the world. I heard a story one time when a guy gets to heaven and and he asks, well, hey, how's um, the reaching the world thing going, and the answer is, well, he's talking to Jesus, and he says, well, you know, uh, I mean, I invested in my disciples, and I taught them to go make other disciples, and so on and so on. And obviously, at some point, we got to you, and so that's great. And then the guy that just got to heaven said, yeah, but Jesus, I mean, it seems like there are not a lot of people these days that are really doing this discipleship thing that you set up. What's the alternative plan? What if people stop doing it? Like you taught them. What's the other plan? And Jesus' answer to him was, there is no other plan. That's the plan.
yeah, yeah. That's a vivid word, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
I do think of it that way, and I know this sounds. I might sound like a Baptist here. I'm not a Baptist, but I'm Presbyterian. So, but I also think it's just a simple thing of obeying the Lord. Like we are His servants, and He is the Lord. It's not. It's simple obedience. Like this is the call of God for us to obey. And one of the things I do like about experiencing God, which we'll probably do at some point, is when Henry Blackaby says it's an oxymoron to say no, Lord. And every time we don't make a disciple and we choose not to live a life of a disciple who makes a disciple, I think we're saying no, Lord. He's given us clearly this commission to go and make disciples. And when we say no, that's disobedience. And God calls us to obedience. Now, we don't do it because we're great people and how awesome we are. We do it by the power of His Spirit and through His grace always. But that's a simple thing for me where it's like, this is just this is what Jesus said. I'm His servant. I'm His follower. So I will do what He said. Not my
yeah,
will, but yours be done.
yeah.
Um,
And like you say, it's the great co-mission
yeah,
we do it in the power of the Holy Spirit, and it's the Holy Spirit who changes people's lives, not our words. But at the same time, He uses us as part of His plan. And so it's the great co-mission, and I've talked to so many people that are whether they're followers of Christ or not, who are just flat out, if they're honest, fairly bored with their life, and don't
yeah.
feel like they have like a great mission and a great purpose in life, and they feel like they're going through the motions, and it's like, man, I don't even know. Uh, and I love this idea that we're on a mission from God. I love that. Like, what do you do with your life? Well, I'm on a mission from God. What about you? Like, what?
Yeah.
What do you mean you're on a mission from God? Sitting on an airplane. Hey, what do you do? Well, I'm on a mission from God.
It's like the Blues Brothers, That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's true. And when you really get a hold of this idea of going and making disciples, that you're a part of this great co-mission with God. I mean, it does give your life purpose beyond the temporary pleasures and things that yeah, it's okay for a little while, but in the end, it doesn't satisfy.
Right. And I do think that's some of the trapping that we could fall into is our life. We think it has mission and purpose because we help people get entertained better, or we help people find temporary satisfaction better. But in the Great Commission, like you said, Bill, we get a chance to impact people's eternity. How crazy is that? I mean,
Yeah,
I think you and I both believe that, we're a small part in the picture, but it's pretty awesome to think that we even have a small part in people impacting people's eternity. I mean, how cool is that?
Yeah, it is cool. And it's also well, I was going to say it's scary, but actually it's not scary because we realize that it's not up to us, that no
Uh-oh.
combination of words that come out of our mouth are going to change anybody's life. It's by the power of the Holy Spirit working in people's lives that that their life is changed. It's not because of us, but at the same time, um, we are part of the mission, and God chooses to use us, and so we actually do have this crazy, I don't know if you call it responsibility, certainly opportunity, uh, to be a part of that. And when we're not, we're not only missing out, but potentially even affecting somebody's eternity. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know where that line is. I know the Apostle Paul gives that great line. How will they hear if nobody tells them?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and clearly Jesus, has this calling, and so again, I think if we take it from the positive stance more, it would be everybody's looking for a purpose in their life. Even we talked about Rick Warren in the beginning here, and I like Rick Warren. I've used his books. I'm not but I think I would love to sit down with him and talk about the interplay between discipleship and evangelism. I wish we
yeah,
could keep those together instead of
yeah,
separated.
yeah,
But he has so many things that he nails, and his whole book and his whole thing was what? The purpose driven life, and millions of copies. One of the strongest sales ever for a Christian book, because people were drawn towards this idea of having a greater purpose beyond themselves. And I think that's what people are looking for. And even in all the things and causes that they pour themselves into that aren't necessarily bad causes, but they're not necessarily eternal causes. And
yeah, yeah.
that's the difference.
Well,
Um,
I love the story of the atheist who is asked, well, why don't you believe in God? And why don't you believe this whole story of Jesus and all that? And he said, well, it's because you don't really believe it. And it's like, well,
mm,
what do you mean? What do you mean I don't believe it? You don't really believe it. You don't believe that Jesus really came and died on the cross and paid for our sins and made a way for us to go to heaven and to avoid going to hell and all that kind of stuff. You can't possibly believe that. Well, what do you
mm,
mean? What do you mean I can't possibly believe it? Of course I do. No, because if you really truly believed that, and you're not dedicating your life to spreading the word about that to everyone that you are in contact with, then you are either delusional, or you're the cruelest, most selfish person that exists, or you don't really believe it. Because if you really believe that and you're not telling people about it, like, how is that possible? It can't be possible. You can't love people and love God and believe those things and then not be doing anything about it at the same time. Therefore, I don't really believe it. That's why I don't believe in God.
yeah, that's
It's
pretty.
pretty convicting.
Yeah. Well, that's probably worth talking a little bit about. I mean, if we're just being honest here, hell is an actual reason to make disciples.
Yeah,
I mean, neither of us grew up in a real Baptist Pentecostal type of experience. And again, I don't want to stereotype anything, but I certainly did not grow up in a fire and brimstone, and I don't think you did either,
no,
where we heard that message of hell every week. In fact, I think that it's safe to say I err too much on the other side. I preached on hell, probably 4 or 5 times total in my, hundreds of sermons that I have preached over the years. And so I definitely think it's one of those things that is worth talking about, because I think it's a real motivator. Because if you really believe, like you said, where people are going, it would change how you did it and why you did it and where you would put your efforts in life. I mean, I don't know. What do you think of when you think of
you know,
hell?
Well, it's interesting, and honestly, the whole idea of, and hell being burning fire and all those kinds of things. I'm not sure if those are literally the case, or if those are words that the writers used to describe, try to describe the most amazing experience that you could possibly imagine, and the most awful experience that you could imagine. And so I think it more has to do with an eternity spent enjoying the presence of God and all of his goodness, versus an eternity of being separated from his goodness and his love and all those things.
I heard it once said that Jesus talked more about hell and money than any other subjects. And those subjects that we as humans talk the least about.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. He used, whatever word you want to anthropomorphize, whatever you want to say, where he takes, Gehenna, which was an actual place that they could see this dump, and with fumes and smells and fires and all this stuff, and gives it a description, so that people could get a taste of what it would be like to spend eternity without the goodness of God. I think of it in terms of being separated from all the parts of God you want and getting the parts of God you don't want. I think the scriptures are pretty clear that we are all objects of God's wrath until we come to Christ. And so unfortunately, unfortunately, Christ came and took the wrath of God on the cross. So, for those of us who know Christ, he paid and took the wrath of God in our place. And those who don't know Christ and who don't follow him, they're going to get to take that wrath for themselves. And boy, if I had the option of picking between those two, I know which one I would pick.
Yeah.
And
well, and I guess just one more that I'd like to share, that I think is just a huge reason why I make disciples. And I got to experience this so much over the years of being on Young Life staff, and talking to literally thousands of teenagers over the years about Jesus. But there is no greater joy than being a part of seeing somebody come to faith in Christ. It's the most
Amen.
amazing thing. I'm not much of a golfer, but there, everybody that's into golf knows this, that and even me, not a very good golfer, every once in a while, I get that shot
Yeah.
or that long putt, and it's like, oh wow. Okay, it's enough. You can play horrible the whole time, but you get that one good shot, and it's like, okay, it's enough to bring me back. And because it's just so amazing, and I know you're a golfer, so you understand that far better than I do.
I would not classify myself as a golfer. I used to be, and now I'm thinking about getting back into it.
and not to compare, a good golf shot to bringing somebody to Christ, but the idea that, like, I guess if you've never led someone to Christ, you don't know what you're missing. You just don't know.
I will tell you, and I would even take it a step further and say, when I'm a part of somebody's journey and they come to Christ,
Yeah.
As Bill Hybels talks about in Just Walk Across the Room, if I'm moving somebody from -15 to -5 and somebody else closes the deal, or the Apostle Paul says someone sows and another one reaps, if
Yeah.
I'm part of their journey and I get to hear that they have come to Jesus, joy fills me to the point with tears almost every time. I can't think
Yeah.
of but a handful of times that hasn't caused me to weep. I think the one thing I would add as we're closing this down would be, in all honesty, part of the reason we want to make disciples is not just to deliver people from the hell of eternity, but also hell on earth. I mean, the world that
Yeah.
we live in is full of evil and pain. I mean, it is a hard place. As
Yeah.
my brother would say, life is tough, get a helmet. And for Christians, we have the ultimate helmet in Jesus Christ. And he shows us a path to walk in healing and to walk in goodness. And I was talking with a friend of mine who's a counselor, and he was saying that with the opioid epidemic that's going on in the world right now, people are not able to get off opioids. And in fact, there's so many problems because when people get off opioids, they almost always go back. And when they go back, they try to go back at the same level they went at when they were high, heavily involved in it. And so they end up overdosing because their body can't take it. And he was saying that in his mind, we should just keep people on them because we can't get them off them anymore. And they have methadone and stuff for that. But in my mind, I worked at a drug and alcohol treatment center, and I just remember the power of Jesus can do all kinds of stuff. My friend, love him to death, but he doesn't know Jesus, and he doesn't know the power. And I have talked to people and know people who come out of opioids through the power of Jesus. And that's a huge extreme example, but it's a total truth for whatever it is: lust, pornography addiction, greed, caught up in materialism, caught up in relationship issues, caught up in whatever it is that we're caught up into. Making disciples delivers people out of that pain and evil and delivers them into the kingdom of light. And boy, that's another great joy that we get to experience. And that's probably enough on all those things. And I actually have like 10 more I could list of why to make disciples. It's much easier to think of a list of why we make disciples, I think, than I thought it would be.
Yeah. And we'll continue talking about those things in the coming weeks. I'm excited for our coming podcasts. We're going to be talking about the book Master Plan of Evangelism by Robert Coleman, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. That really, it's a book about discipleship, even though it's called the Master Plan of Evangelism. And so we're gonna go through some of the principles in this book and kind of break them down a little bit and share some stories. And I think it's going to be really, really encouraging for people. Also, in the coming months, we're going to start at the end of this month. We're going to start our next round of leader training. And so if you're interested in learning more about what it means to be a disciple who makes disciples, and maybe leading a small group or being a mentor for somebody, we'd really encourage you to sign up for our next class. And you can do that by going to our website and checking it out and letting us know that you're interested, or you can just contact Mike and I directly. But yeah, on our website, ourtruelegacy.com, we've got that going, and we just encourage you to check that out.
But I want to just add one thing there. With this program, it's only once a month where we have a commitment, and we do it a Zoom call so you can be wherever you are in the world and join us. In addition to that, we have some podcasts that are right off this that you listen to. We often have a reading that we will incorporate in at some point or another. And then in addition to that, Bill and I meet with you one-on-one to kind of coach you into this whole process of becoming a disciple who makes disciples. And we've taken a lot of time to develop this program and to help you get to this place. So I just want to tell people a little bit about what it was so that they could be more excited about it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's perfect. So, man, I hope in the coming weeks, a bunch of you are going to jump on board with us with that. And as always, we also really appreciate you jumping on board with us and supporting financially. Again, ourtruelegacy.com. You can do that there, and continue to help us spread the word about this podcast and give it a 5-star review and share it with your friends. And if you want to watch us and see our pretty faces doing this, you can also check us out on YouTube. And you can watch and listen to us, and it's the Legacy Discipleship Podcast on YouTube. So check that out as well. So anyways, thanks for being part of everything that we're doing, and let's continue to go be disciples who make disciples. Amen.
Amen.